I should preface this by letting everybody know that I am a Muslim.
Oh, all right. Good. That's great. That's great.
And I'm also running for Congress, and your nuances, you seem to have a really excellent understanding of this issue. We'll ignore your complete mischaracterization of the history of Islam.
Can we do it privately?
Yeah, sure. But I think there's, you went back and you said that, there are two fundamental issues you have to address, our dependence on oil and our borders. I would add a real important one to that, which is our foreign policy in the Middle East. Because, a lot of the radicalization that we're seeing is a result of our own policies in the Middle East. It's a result of our support of the Saudis. It's a result of us not being able to broker a realistic peace deal between Israelis and Palestinians. It is a result of us backing dictators like Bashar, like Assad, like Mubarak.
But what's our alternative?
Well, our alternative is if we're going to preach a policy of democracy in the Middle East, then we need to make sure that that is our standard. One of the problems, I've spoken with people who are involved with Hezbollah or involved with Hamas, and one of the things that they get frustrated with is when they engage in the democratic process, the minute they elect somebody that we don't like, we shut that process down. And so what we have from the Muslim point of view in the Middle East is we have a situation where they see us as saying, do what we say, not do as we do. And so that level of hypocrisy, more than anything, radicalizes people in the Middle East.
I agree. I agree. That said, I don't have the simple solutions, but the one thing I would say also is that even though you don't like my characterization, maybe I've read different books than you, but I can give you. No, let's not talk about the Quran. I've read it. You've read it.
I'm not going to put a flop on it, so don't worry about that.
No. No, I think this is the debate that's needed.
Absolutely, this is the most important thing that we have to do.
But this fundamentalism, just as Christian fundamentalism has went on for centuries and still exists today, but it's not. You don't have the numbers out there trying to, for whatever reasons, do what they're doing. I believe, first of all, that even the modern jihad certainly predates our policies, it predates Israel and it predates oil. And certainly you can go back to Qutb and read what he taught. Qutb and his followers taught Bin Laden, taught Zawahiri. So there is a group teaching militant jihad that dates back at least 60 years. I'm talking about the modern, after the fall of the caliphate. I'm talking about what then kind of brought this back. It predates our policy. I'm not saying our policies are perfect, but I would rather see our leaders here start talking like maybe you and I could talk, instead of immediately attacking each other because they're forced into situations. I don't know what to do with our dependence on oil because we haven't done anything for 40 years. But that is part of the problem. I don't know what to do with Israel. Israel is an issue. It's a reality. It's a democracy. It's there. It deserves to exist. And some people believe it shouldn't exist. So, Israel's not going to go away. And Israel has nuclear weapons. And we can't. So you say we haven't solved the Palestinian-Israeli peace process. First of all, peace issue. First of all, only they can solve it. In one sense, someone has to guide it. But when you're fighting at home and arguing every single thing yourself, it's very hard to then step up above all this practice when you do have problems and solve it. This must be solved. I agree. I go into Palestine.
That's why I'm running.
I can go into Palestine in great detail if you want to. That's another subject totally, but it has to be solved. Yes, please.
Jack, I'm going to do something a little unusual, if I may, and my question to you is more of a comment to you and a question to someone else. You're dividing the opposition here to us into two factions. 95% is a psychological, philosophical war in which we have to unite to combat. The 5%, or approximately 50 to 75 million people, is militant.
Or lean towards militant.
Lean towards militant, okay, and even if 10% of that, it's many. But we have spent close to $5 trillion in the last 12 to 14 years on our military. So let me ask a question of a person who's an expert in that particular facet of your conversation, if I may. General, are we winning the war militarily?
Strategically and operationally, yes. Tactically, I'm not sure.
Well, first, and the overall struggle, General, I'm sure you agree, cannot be won militarily. That said,
That's true.
Our military, let's call it dominance, particularly of the air, does allow certain things to be done, whether you agree with them or not. But this war cannot be won militarily, period.
Let me follow that right up, if I may.
Struggle won't be won.
The struggle, I'm sorry. Yeah, we use the forces. We don't even have a war in Iraq. That's why we won the war in Iraq. It was 3 or 4 weeks, I think. We went to war to end the regime of Saddam Hussein. That took 3 or 4 weeks. We've been in a struggle ever since to win the peace, just as our struggles in Europe and Southeast Asia and everywhere else goes on for a long time, but not the same amount.
My follow-up to that specific, if I may. If we're losing it militarily, quote-unquote losing, and we're not united politically, philosophically, and psychologically, that doesn't speak very well. Is it going to take, in your opinion, another terrorist attack on our homeland in order to unite us so that we might win this?
I hope not, but I suspect so. Since 9/11, there have been dozens of serious attacks thwarted around the world. 5 or 6 that were headed here. One that was headed just about 16 months ago. There were a group of terrorists that were trying to take over 10, 11 planes. They had liquid explosives. They had garage door openers. You could slap the explosives against the wall. You could have blown these planes up one at a time over U.S. cities. It would have been more terrifying, let's say. I mean, the numbers would have been analogous to more terrifying, and it would have crippled our entire industry, air travel and so forth, even beyond 9/11. I think that was stopped. And there are a lot of people today in the United States never heard of it, number one. And secondly, there are people in Europe and England believe that it was a creation of Tony Blair or someone. I've seen nothing. In other words, when we stop something, it doesn't make headlines. So I'm afraid that it's going to take another wake-up call. I do not think it has to be in the United States. I hope and pray it's not in the United States. And if there were an organization of terrorists out there rather than a loosely knit group of extremists, if I were there and I wanted to lead them, I would tell them stay away from the United States. You woke up this week and going on, leave them alone. But I think it's remarkable. There's been no second attack here, but every day you can go on a site called the Religion of Peace. You probably know the site. You probably don't agree with the site, but there are 82 countries where there are acts of violence of young girls, Christian girls being attacked on the way to school and so forth. And things I don't even want to talk about here. The numbers aren't great. There are, a dozen people killed this day, 2 dozen people, not near as many as killed in the United States every day. But there are acts going on all around the world every day. But the big acts, I don't know. I don't think they can do another 9/11 without some form of WMD. And I don't worry about that in the next year or 2 or 5 years. I'm talking about 10 to 20 to 30 years, unless you turn the tide and give these young people in these regions opportunity and education. And, I don't know. Please, I'm sorry.
Jack, I'd just like to take advantage of the fact that we have a Muslim here with us today who is obviously intelligent and obviously verbal. Simplistic people around this country feel that the Muslims have an objective of killing the infidels. That's something.
Include me, I think.
I'm just saying that's the way the feeling is. And I'd like to ask if that's true. And if it's true, why is it true? And why can't we all get along together?
For the overwhelming majority of Muslims, no, that's true.
We all agree.
This gets back to how you characterize the history of Islam. And when a lot of times when you're talking about issues like religion, what's important isn't so much what actually happens sometimes as the way you believe, as the way that people believe what happened. is important. See, you said I was articulate. Screw myself up there. No,
I said verbal.
yeah. Oh, okay. Well, there we go. But no, that's not true. It's not true at all. And you know, the overwhelming majority of the Muslims who in the world are as frustrated with these extremists as I think we are here. They feel that they make them look bad. They are just as disgusted by their tactics as we are. But the problem is, as it goes back to what I was saying to Jack, is that they are frustrated by their extremists, but what they see coming from us seems even more extreme to them. Because when we talk about democracy, you know, we understand what it is here living in this country, what it means to live in that society, but what it means to them is looking down the business end of an Apache helicopter. You know, because the democracy talk comes and then the bullets start flying. So it's a job that in order to make peace, in order to understand that they don't all want to kill us, we have to also look at what we're putting into this thing.
And you're saying there is hope.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of hope.
Jack, you know, I agree that let's say like the Cold War, it took how many years, and this is a 50-year battle or whatever. But our country doesn't really have a good sense of keeping focus. We have a low tolerance for conflict and war, and you know, it's done, we went over, and we're on to doing our thing, whatever that is, until the next one comes. How do we change the attitude of our culture? Because our culture has a problem in that regard if we're going to take on a 50-year challenge. Well, I mean, other than, I understand that the foreign policy has to change, I understand that we have to become less dependent on oil, but it's our culture.
No, those are mandates, yeah.
Yeah, that's how it, because other things will come along. You know, what do we do with our culture?
I think we need, and I really want to hear you on this, I think we need people like you run for office. I think we need, just as the Christian faith, which I'm part of, was modernized or had a reformation. I think that if the Quran is misinterpreted by some people who are writing, maybe by me, because what I read maybe is by people who are trying to get here. I'm not a simplistic person, but I have read more books than I like to count, and come to some conclusions. Maybe it's those works, but we need some sort of modernization. I think, you know, even the Bible, I mean, you see Huxley right now fighting the issues of, you know, the world built in 7 days and so forth. You have to modernize the words of any written faith, let's say. And what bothers me, and I'm going to pick up on that question, you know, you come up with it if you want, but seriously, because I'm worried that we don't have, for a variety of reasons, some of which is they reject our own Hollywood and everything else, we don't have strong, moderate, or maybe better word, modern voices of Islam in the world. Some in the United States, if anything, you have a handful of people in the United States, Muslims that are speaking, fewer in Europe, and I would say fewer that I know of, well, at least fewer that have global reach in the very, very large populations of Islam. And this is not going to be solved unless and until Muslims in the world, in my opinion, are free to go to the park, to Hyde Park, stand on the soapbox and talk about that they're upset about some things going on by the radical elements of their faith. I'm sorry, go ahead, Brian.
Jack, did I miss it, or were there no Muslim outcry about September 11th?
I can't name a single really global reach leader that spoke out. I think the King of Jordan spoke out briefly and then backed off. In the King of Morocco and Tunisia is not really
There's the problem.
Absolutely. No, but I mean, and I would say both secular and religious Muslim leaders. I don't think that in the kind of discussion, and maybe there's more privacy going on in the Muslim. I don't care what the reasons are. The Mormons don't talk about the faith, but in this case, we need a broad discussion, and putting aside all of these, even foreign policy, I would love to see a national discourse on this issue. And I don't think we have it.
The fact is, we need to know thine enemy. and it's an enemy is Islamic jihadism,
And it's not Islam,
military,
it's jihadism.
right, if it's fascism, then we have to identify it, like you said.
How many
Just talking about the religion itself is not the issue. There are good and bad in every religion. There is modernization, and there are people that believe in the old school.
Yes.
Latin masses are coming back. I mean, there are things that go on. The problem is we've got to identify who the enemy is. If the enemy is those people, that's what we have to work with.
Yeah, and there are many in this room who would wish we hadn't gone to Iraq, or that we just get over all this. This reminds me in the sense of 1938. I know that I've read enough about 1938 that there were folks trying to speak like me. They were alarmists, that Adolf Hitler was not a very nice person, and there were a lot of other people who said, come on, and Chamberlain got off the plane and was applauded. It was all over, right? How many Germans, other than the young Germans that were taught fascism, taught Nazism, taught racial supremacy, how many Germans, certainly elderly Germans, believed in Adolf Hitler? How many Russians believed in Stalin? I mean, that's what we got to do. We got to talk about this issue and not get defensive. We can't. Yeah.
Can I comment on that real quick? No. You're absolutely right. Islamic jihadism is a real threat. It is a real threat to Americans. It is a real threat to what's going on around the globe. But I think we have to be careful. There's an old saying in the military that the Army is always ready, is always prepared to fight the last war. And I think in this case we have to be very careful not to draw too many analogies to World War II, or not to draw too many analogies to the Cold War, because we have a very different global situation today. This is a very different type of threat. And like you pointed out, there is no clear hierarchy to Al-Qaeda. And more importantly, Al-Qaeda and the groups like them are a relatively minor part of their cultures. What we have to do is we have to realize that terrorism is a threat to the American people, but the only thing that is a threat to the existence of the United States, to the existence of the culture of the West, is if we engage in a war on terror in the wrong way, because that's how we can destroy ourselves.
It's nice that religion is the problem. Our government was founded, our founding fathers were intelligent enough to form a secular government. But do you think that this is above Islam versus Christianity?
I don't even like to call it a religious war.
But it is.
And I certainly don't see it as a war on terror. I think I am violently opposed, and have been since day one, to call this a war on terror. My God, when a war on terror goes to Detroit, I shouldn't pick on Detroit, but there are 18,000 murders in this country every year. God knows how many rapes and robberies and sexual abuse. So there's terror, and terror will always be. So we're not at war on terror. We're not really in a religious war, because Islam has not declared war on Judeo-Christian values, no vice versa. We are, and I hate the word war, because it implies military war. There are maybe military actions along the way. There are groups that must be stopped, maybe small numbers. We have an ideological struggle going on, because a small number, I'd say, I don't know, it's 5 or 10%, but that's what the estimates are. And again, not in America or Europe, but around the world, that maybe are preaching or teaching real fundamentalism. That struggle, if they want to, move on their own, there's no problem. If they threaten the rest of the world, then you can't just let this continue. And I think we need modern Muslim voices, to speak against violence. Let me tell you what a modern Muslim is. You're one, so let me see if I can find you. I think a modern Muslim must condemn violence or killings of people because of what they believe. A modern Muslim must agree that religion is a matter of personal choice. You don't have to be a Muslim to get to heaven. Well, I'm not going to go there. You cannot force your religion on other people. Just as fundamentalist Christians shouldn't be doing that. But they're not beheading quite as many people in parts of the world. So I think, and I think in this century, the rights of women, that's a much more complicated issue because it's a cultural issue. We hear extreme stories that they're probably on the fringe of a girl being imprisoned or whipped because she went out with a boy or something like that. You know, I mean, I think there's a role in the 21st century, I'm talking as a secularist now, for women to have roles in government, for example. But that means you have to agree that secular government can exist. So I think a modern Muslim must accept that there's a role for secular states. That's not negotiable. So when we talk about diplomacy and negotiating, you can't negotiate the points I just made. So that's my definition of a modern.
One more question, John.
Yeah, all right. Yes.
Will Israel take out the nuclear in Iran?
Probably. If it happens. If you could, have you seen our session? You want to see it with me?
Absolutely.
February 23rd, we're showing a film session. I don't know anything about it. Pass it to Roy and others. We'll be showing it somewhere in North Naples. It's a film that's provocative, that is being banned by a number of universities, that is being called anti-Islam, anti-Muslimism. It's a film that draws an analogy that you say is not a valid analogy, but they have gotten secret footage inside some camps of some very, very young children and what they're saying about Jihad, about killing Jews and Christians, that know nothing about foreign diplomacy, I'm not talking about people, and that are dressed in uniform and raising their arms, much like the Israelis did. And we've got to accept, we need Muslim leadership in this world that will speak in this. I hope you're elected. I hope you become a voice, because we don't have, the number of Muslims we have speaking out in this country, even in this country, are far from small.
Time for one more, and this is
I'm sorry, I always talk too long, huh?
I have seen the movie, a very powerful movie. I wouldn't call it fair and balanced.
It's not fair and balanced. It's not fair and balanced, but I think we should see it.
But a point that I think we've skipped over that really is unavoidable is that at the time of the Crusades, we certainly have given that Western culture and the Muslim culture were irreconcilable. And that's not basically changed. The only thing about them is that they are what in the military they would call asymmetrics. They don't line up nose to nose. Both sides are keeping score at different ways. So it's like a guerrilla war, like in Vietnam. You know, conventional forces against guerrillas and that sort of thing.
The answer, a very high percentage of people believe what you just said to me is totally unacceptable. Because we're not in the Crusades. In fact, when the Crusades, I'll be speaking in a breakfast meeting against the Crusades. We're not in the Crusades. We're in an era of an internet where people can communicate for nothing. Radicals can communicate costing them nothing to other radicals around the world. And we're in a world, whether we like it or not, that WMD exists. And does anybody think in the next 50 years radicals are not going to get WMD? We have to deal with the WMD issue. We're not talking about next year. We say, Iran won't have a bomb for 3 or 4 years. All right, let's wait for 3 or 4 years. This is silly. We have to deal with this now. Because it's going to be a lot easier to deal with now than it's going to be dealt with 5 or 6 years from now. Another 9/11, whether it's in Europe or wherever, and now, I've read articles, I'm sure you have, that if we had another 9/11 in this country, we could have Muslims being interned like the Japanese were. You know, we can't allow it, because we can't do nothing. We can't do nothing. And you're here today. I know you don't normally speak these kind of subjects. I know it's not a pleasant subject, but let's talk about this, and let's get people like him in the equation. Let's talk about this in a civil way, and not in a partisan way. Because as long as we by ourselves, we can't begin to lead America and then lead the world and address this issue. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.